Have I ever told you that I really love Astro City?
I freaking love Astro City.
Exactly. The key hook of Astro City was taking the idea of living in a superhero universe and focus on what it would be like to live in said universe. This style, commonly referred to as the man on the street approach, would be fleshed out in Astro City and other books that came before it, like Kingdom Come. But arguably, the series that really showed that there was potential for this style of storytelling was, of course, Marvel's. Marvel's is the story of Phil Sheldon, an upcoming reporter who is first seen being sent on a job to cover a scientist holding some press conference. The scientist, Dr. Phineas Horton, unveils his creation, an android that can burst into flame. The first superhero of the Marvel Universe, the Human Torch. No, not that one. If you've read any number of Marvel stories, you can probably guess the assembled reporter's reaction. It goes from wondering whatever this crackpot scientist is going to show them to outright terror at the Torch's reveal. Also, quick aside, since the original Torch had been long surpassed by the Fantastic Four's Torch, yes, legacy characters have been around that long, there's an issue 0 that focuses on him to give the audience a bit of a feel for the character. What's interesting about Marvel's is Phil Sheldon, our protagonist, so to speak, isn't like, hey, maybe he isn't all that bad, or let's wait before jumping to conclusions. He joins in on the hate train, and he feels no need to get off once the next major superhero is introduced. The Marvel Universe's premier asshole, Namor, not to be confused with the Marvel Universe's premier dick, Quicksilver. However, when the third Marvel, that is how they are referred to in this story and that is how I will refer to them as from now on, makes his appearance, Captain America, he gets an overwhelmingly positive response, which Phil, and the reader, notes might be due to him being draped in the American flag, making him feel more like he's on their side. This belief is further strengthened when, on being showed newsreels of Namor and Torch fighting Nazis, they go from being hated and feared to being loved and adored. Phil is still a bit uncertain about the Marvels, until he tries to get a picture of a fight between Namor and the Torch. He's left in awe of them, and despite getting injured in the fight, he's left with a more positive attitude than before. Now is as good a time as any to point out the structure that Marvel's uses in telling its story. Through the lens of Phil Sheldon, quite literally, we see the history of the Marvel Universe, from its inception in the Golden Age all the way throughout the Silver Age, visiting key moments in its history. What Marvel's also does is slightly retcon certain moments, though we'll get to the big one later. Anyway, from the second issue onwards, we have entered the Silver Age, where heroes like the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, well, 3 of them, are the toast of the town. During all this, Phil's gotten married, has 2 daughters, and also wants to publish a book about the Marvels using the pictures he's taken all these years. However, there seems to be a lurking threat that has everyone, even our man Phil, on edge. Mutants! Once again, similar to the Torch's reveal, Phil is not exactly a stand-up guy. He even ends up part of a mob trying to kill a group of mutants. I wonder who these people are. They kinda seem familiar. In most stories, this would push Phil into the territory of being an unsympathetic protagonist, but writer Kurt Busiek does an excellent job of portraying Phil's fears really well. For him and most of the general populace, mutants represent an unknown entity. And in typical Marvel fashion, they lash out at what they don't understand. But that changes one day when Phil discovers that his daughters have been caring for a young mutant girl who has run away from home. This causes him to step back and actually take the time to research mutants and the X-Men, while at the same time worried what would happen to him and his family if people found out that they were safeguarding a mutant. And on the night the Sentinels were unleashed on the Marvel Universe, riots erupt across America. And the young child leaves, not wanting to put the family that sheltered her at risk. Phil and his family are left wondering what happens to her. In the third issue, we see that the public isn't quite as in love with the Marvels as they once were. While guys like Spidey and the Hulk were never really popular, let alone the X-Men, the public seems ready to turn on the heroes like the Avengers and the Fantastic Four at the first opportunity. Phil, who over all these years has grown appreciative of the Marvels, all of the Marvels, for what they do, is extremely frustrated with everyone around him for having this attitude. He has also thrown himself into his work, not being able to spend time with his family anymore. And then, on a day unlike any other, the sky was set aflame as a silver being cut a grim figure through the clouds, followed by a message to the rest of the world. Galactus is coming to consume the planet. Similar to how the Torch and Namor went from hated to loved as they fought the Nazis in World War II, everyone cheers on the Fantastic Four as they faced Galactus. And they lose. The end of the world certain, Phil returns home to his family to be with them in the final hours, noting that though there was fear among the populace, there was little to no rioting, as everyone awaited the seemingly inevitable. But then, at the last moment, the Fantastic Four strike back alongside the Silver Surfer as the world watched with bated breath and cheered them on. After some agonizing moments, Galactus is sent back and the Earth is spared. And everyone immediately goes back to hating the heroes, dismissing the entire thing as a hoax. If you feel as frustrated as I was on reading this part, you will definitely feel vindicated when at the end of the third issue, Phil yells at an ungrateful crowd to stop digging for garbage and just admit their gratitude towards the heroes. In the fourth and final issue, Phil's book has become a massive hit, though the people's attitude towards the heroes has remained the same, cheering them on when lives were at stake and hating them otherwise. Phil has become almost fanatically dedicated to show the world what he sees when he sees the Marvels. He talks to the Marvel Universe's angry Zit, J. Jonah Jameson, who has been making occasional appearances throughout the story, about why he hates Spider-Man so much to the point of hypocrisy. Old JJ lets an interesting idea slip, though whether or not intentionally is left up to the reader, saying that if the heroes were as good as Phil claimed, what did that say about the rest of them? This is actually a nice bit of continuity, as in his original appearance, this was part of JJ's motivation to bring down Spider-Man. Phil then decides to take it upon himself to try to clear Spider-Man of the murder of Captain George Stacy. And here, my viewers, I want to talk to you about something. I was reading an article on CBR, link in the description, which states that by writing Marvels, Kurt Busiek unwittingly ruined DC and Marvel Comics. The article is very much tongue-in-cheek and doesn't actually blame Busiek, simply noting that the big two just saw the success of Marvels and realized, hey, if we pander to nostalgia, we'll make a lot of money. But while rereading Marvels, there is one thing I feel Busiek is somewhat responsible for. Saint Gwen. I'll explain what that means as I continue the story. So Phil decides to go talk to Gwen Stacy about her father's death. She reveals that she had forgiven Spidey and just wanted to get her father justice. Phil takes a liking to the young lady, and during Namor's umpteenth attack on New York, dude's gotta maintain his reputation after all, Gwen is mesmerized by the beauty of it all, in a whimsical moment that wouldn't feel out of place in a Disney movie. Oh, the irony. And if you know your comic history, you know what's coming. The Green Goblin, the Brooklyn Bridge, Gwen falling, and Spidey failing to save her. This incident traumatizes Phil, losing his faith in the Marvels because they were unable to save
Kurt
Gwen.
Busiek
choosing to end the story at the death of Gwen Stacy is no coincidence, mind you. It's very much an intentional decision, as Gwen's death was one of the markers of the end of the Silver Age of comics. To retire. But Busiek choosing to make Gwen into an avatar of all that was pure and innocent in the Marvel Universe, that's his creative choice. Because you see, Gwen Stacy was not a nice person in the comics. She was initially hostile to Peter and took an interest in him because he barely showed any interest in her. And she blamed Spidey for her father's death in the original series. So, her forgiving Spider-Man, that's a retcon this series added. I know what some of you are thinking right now. Well, isn't Kurt Busiek using Gwen's death to signify the end of a more innocent time and the beginning of a darker period in the Marvel Universe? Therefore, by making Gwen more sympathetic, doesn't that make the story more impactful? Well, firstly, I like the way you think, dear viewer. But more importantly, if anything this series has periodically highlighted, it's that the innocent times, despite all that innocent to begin with. Marvel. And as it's someone who appreciated the Marvel Universe eye for detail one of its story, unexplored this retcon ends up giving me a bit of whiplash. Phil Sheldon's character growth is very well handled, even though I'm not quite happy with how his story ended. And hey, I haven't even once mentioned Alex Ross's amazing photorealistic art style, which helps this book stand out among its peers. Kurt Busiek uses his encyclopedic knowledge of the Marvel Universe to craft an amazing tale, even though it may have encouraged DC and Marvel to take a dip in the retcon pool a bit too often.